There was a real shock in the case against Sean Diddy Combs, and according to those in the courtroom, the atmosphere became so tense that you could feel the fear in the air. Everything took a completely different turn when a person appeared in court who was not expected, and certainly not in such a role. Rapper Ice Cube, who for years had sworn that he was not involved in anything and had nothing to say, suddenly appeared on the prosecution side. And he didn't come empty-handed, but with a very specific and weighty greeting for Diddy. Cube didn't give a long speech or get emotional. He just pulled out a USB flash drive. And judging by the reaction of the lawyers, this flash drive contained not just information, but a direct hit. The video is only 7 minutes long, but according to lawyers, this is more than enough time to close the case on Combs' guilt once and for all and send him to prison for life. In the courtroom, people said that this video was like an atomic bomb in the prosecution's case. What exactly is in these frames is still a secret, but journalists who attended the trial noticed that Combs' face turned pale when he watched the video, and his lawyer looked as if he had lost control of the situation for the first time ever. But perhaps the most resonant thing was not the video itself, but the fact that Ice Cube had finally broken his nearly 30-year silence with this move. All this time he had kept his distance, played it neutral, and dismissed any connection to the case. And now, suddenly, he speaks out loud, with evidence and with such effect. It's as if he's been waiting all this time for the right moment to deliver one decisive blow. When Ice Cube entered the courtroom, there was such silence that it seemed as if even the walls were holding their breath. There was something doomed about the silence, as if everyone knew in advance that something was about to happen, after which there would be no turning back. The atmosphere was more like preparations for an execution than another court hearing. And Cube, appearing in the doorway, did not look at all like a man who had come to give dry testimony. He did not enter as a witness, but as a judge, an executioner, someone who had come to put an end to it all. He was holding a neat folder with documents and a small flash drive, the very one that would later be talked about all over the internet. Rumor had it that it contained what Hollywood had preferred to ignore for decades. It was the truth. Not pretty, not glossy, not stylized for a press release, but the naked, raw, and unpleasant truth that had previously been swept under the rug, silencing anyone who tried to speak out. Cube approached, stood before the court, and looked Diddy straight in the eye. Once, that look was the look of a colleague in the music business, perhaps even a friend. But now it was the look of a man who was no longer going to remain silent. And Diddy, once a rap legend, a millionaire, an icon of the American stage, at that moment looked like nothing more than a defendant who had been pinned against the wall. No one in the courtroom even moved. It was as if everyone had collectively stopped breathing. Of course, the situation had already been heated. Cassie Ventura had given her testimony, and even Justin Bieber had unexpectedly supported the prosecution, forcing everyone to reconsider their opinion of what was happening. But it was Ice Cube's appearance, according to lawyers, that was the point of no return. After his words and the materials presented to him, the picture of the case changed dramatically. What had started as a high-profile trial turned into a historic moment. Cube didn't just testify, he did what no one expected him to do, and judging by the reaction in the courtroom, he did it at the right time and left Diddy with no chance. Ice Cube didn't beat around the bush. He started right away with the most important thing as always, reminding everyone that he had previously sworn to stay away from all of this. For many years, he said he didn't want to have anything to do with what was going on behind the scenes in show business. He distanced himself, kept quiet, and avoided questions. But, in his words, the moment came when silence became worse than participation. Everything changed, and now he could no longer turn a blind eye. He stood before the court as if he had shed his celebrity persona. No drama, no posturing. He didn't speak as a rap icon or a former hip-hop star, but as a man who had had enough. With every word, it became clear that he wasn't there for the headlines or the publicity. He spoke from the heart. And he didn't speak only for himself. He stated that in this case, he was not representing Ice Cube alone, but all those who had been broken over the years, morally, physically, and psychologically. He spoke for those who had been humiliated, intimidated, and silenced. For those who were pushed out of the industry and forgotten as soon as they became inconvenient. He spoke for those who did not have the opportunity to go to court with a flash drive and documents. He was their voice. And at that moment in the courtroom, He sounded louder than any lawyer's speech or prosecutor's accusation. Cube didn't try to be a hero. He just couldn't pretend anymore that he didn't know what was going on. And judging by the reaction of those present, he became the boiling point after which this whole story finally reached a new level. Diddy's lawyers were clearly not prepared for this turn of events. Just a couple of minutes ago, they looked calm, collected, almost condescending, acting as if everything was under control, and there would be no more unpleasant surprises. But as soon as Ice Cube took out the flash drive and started talking, all their confidence evaporated. They began whispering to each other, rummaging through papers, grabbing their tablets, pretending they knew what to do. In reality, they resembled mice caught in a bright light, running around fussing, but with no way out. The jury was clearly not expecting this turn of events either. People who had already begun to form a picture of what was happening in their minds now looked at each other in complete confusion. Some raised their eyebrows, some gasped quietly. Everyone understood. The situation had just been turned upside down. The very fact of Cube's appearance was particularly stunning. For years, he had publicly denied any involvement in Diddy's so-called freak-off parties, the scandalous events that were the talk of Hollywood, but which no one dared to mention out loud. He insisted that he had never been there, that he kept his distance from all that. And now, not only had he shown up, but he had also brought evidence that could not be swept under the rug. And these weren't rumors, abstract accusations, or the latest gossip from the tabloids. These were specific documents, video recordings, and, most importantly, detailed descriptions of incidents, with names, dates, and details that would be difficult to fabricate. What had previously been hidden in the shadows was now laid out on the courtroom table. And judging by the faces of the defense for the first time, they really had nothing to say. Ice Cube didn't just side with Cassie Ventura. He went much further. He literally laid out the entire scheme that he claims Sean Diddy Combs had been building for years. According to Ice Cube, it wasn't about harmless parties with champagne, glitter, and dancing until dawn. It was much darker and more dangerous. He described a closed, sophisticated system of pressure in which everything was streamlined. Behind the facade of glamour lay traps that young artists and younger artists, those who were just starting out and dreaming of a career, fell into. They were invited to so-called parties, but these events quickly turned into a trap. There, they were provoked into compromising behavior, often secretly filmed. After that, there was no way back. Those who did not obey lost everything. Cub said that people were driven to psychological exhaustion, made dependent on the label, on money, on connections, and when someone tried to resist, when they started asking questions or getting out of control, they were simply crushed. Morally, legally, sometimes physically. Some disappeared from the industry's radar, some were smeared in the media, and some ended up in rehabilitation centers with dubious reputations. Resistance, according to Cube, meant one thing: you no longer existed. He spoke calmly, without drama, but in every sentence you could sense the exhaustion of a man who had watched it all from the sidelines for too long. Cube said he could no longer remain silent because this was not about one person or one victim. It was an entire system in which fear was the main currency. And it was Diddy, according to him, who was the architect of this structure built on intimidation, manipulation, and strict control. One of the darkest and most difficult moments in Ice Cube's speech was when he talked about Jamie Foxx. It all started when Jamie was at the peak of his career. An Oscar, leading roles, and wild popularity. He seemed invulnerable, a man to whom Hollywood already owed a monument in his lifetime. And that's when, according to Cube, he was drawn into that very circle which looked like an elite hangout from the outside, but turned out to be a carefully organized trap. Jamie was invited to one of Diddy's signature parties. It was supposed to be a friendly gesture, an easy entry into an elite club of the chosen few. But, according to Cube, it was not so harmless. Hidden cameras, traps, provocations, everything to get compromising material. Jamie became the next target. He was filmed without his knowledge and then blackmailed. At first, it was subtle hints. Then it got harsh, threats. When Fox realized what he had gotten himself into and tried to break free, everything went haywire. It was like a script. The roles that used to go to him as the first on the list suddenly started going to others. His reputation as America's sweetheart began to crack. And then, coincidence? Strange articles began to appear in the tabloids. Jamie was behaving inappropriately, disrupting shoots. He had problems. Rumors, hints, dirty smears, all in the best traditions of information warfare. But the most alarming moment came in 2023 when Jamie suddenly ended up in the hospital. At the time, everything seemed very mysterious. No precise diagnoses, no explanations, only rumors and speculation. And now Cube is stating outright that it wasn't just an illness, it was an attack, targeted and planned. According to him, Jamie became a threat to the system because he knew too much and tried to get out of the game by not obeying. And the system, as Cube emphasizes, didn't stand on ceremony with people like that. Either you play by the rules, or you're removed from the picture, by any means necessary. Then Ice Cube went even deeper. He recounted how in 2018, when the tension surrounding Jamie Foxx reached its peak, Foxx shared his fears with him in a panic. Foxx wasn't just talking about his career or rumors. He was talking about a real danger that was hanging over him. According to him, in this system, you are called family, as if you are part of a big, friendly team that can be trusted. But that's only as long as you obey and do what you're told. As soon as you start to resist or show independence, you are simply erased from the game. You disappear as if you never existed. These words struck Cube so deeply that he has not been able to sleep peacefully since. He was tormented by guilt and fear. What if the same thing happened to him? Or what if other people who might also be trapped couldn't be helped? This story became more than just another scandal for him. It was a real wake-up call that couldn't be ignored. Ice Cube didn't stop at Diddy. He said that this case was just the tip of the iceberg. This whole story is part of a much larger and more brutal machine that has long had a firm grip on the music and entertainment industry. According to him, the real puppet masters are much higher up, and among them are names that have long been considered untouchable. He directly named two figures who, in his opinion, control this system from the shadows: Oprah Winfrey and Quincy Jones. Oprah, according to Cube, is far from just a TV host and philanthropist. He said that she actively controls who will rise and fall in the industry. As an example, he said that Oprah called Jamie Foxx right before the Oscars, not to congratulate him or wish him luck, but to hint at how he should behave in order to stay in the game and avoid trouble. Quincy Jones, according to Cube, is generally considered one of the most influential and mysterious players in this system. He seems to keep everything under lock and key, knowing all the secrets, mysteries, and behind-the-scenes agreements. It is he, according to Cube, who decides who will get the opportunity to rise to the top and who will be destroyed and wiped off the face of the stage as if they never existed. This statement caused shock and disbelief in the hall. After all, the names of these people have long been associated with enormous respect and influence. But Cube was serious, emphasizing that behind the beautiful picture of fame lies a cruel and ruthless mechanism that is controlled from behind the scenes by precisely such figures. According to him, as long as this system exists, no one is guaranteed a place in the sun, and anyone who dares to speak out against it risks losing everything. At one such meeting, which took place in Quincy Jones's luxurious mansion, Ice Cube recounted a particularly harsh episode. There, Jamie Foxx was not simply offered a deal, but given an ultimatum. No negotiations, no deals, just a harsh demand to obey and play by their rules. It wasn't a choice between yes or no, but a direct order. Either you fit into their system or you're simply thrown out of the game. Cube emphasized that these cases are not isolated incidents. There are dozens, if not hundreds of them. Young, talented artists are lured in by the bright wrapper of success, fame, and luxury. They see glamorous parties, meetings with influential people, and the prospect of lucrative contracts. But behind this picture lies a trap. They are filmed with hidden cameras, intimidated, blackmailed with compromising information, all to break their will and force them to obey. According to Cube, this is not just pressure, but a real machine for turning people into obedient slaves of the system. Those who resist are broken, morally and psychologically, and sometimes physically. They are deprived of their right to independence and choice, turning them into tools for promoting the goals of others. It was this grim truth that Ice Cube decided to expose because he saw how many talented people were losing themselves in this shadow. And for him, it became a matter of honor to stop this system before it destroyed even more lives. To back up his words and prove that everything he was saying was not just empty accusations, Ice Cube presented a video in court that left everyone speechless. It was a 7-minute video from a party in Miami in 2016, filmed secretly, and, according to Ice Cube, recorded by a former employee of Bad Boy Records who apparently couldn't keep quiet any longer. When the video was played, the courtroom fell silent. The screen flickered with dim light, showing the faces of famous people whom everyone was used to seeing on magazine covers and red carpets. But here, they looked different. Relaxed, confused, and at times lost. Drugs and alcohol flashed across the screen, creating an atmosphere that was anything but festive. A girl with a blank stare, as if locked in a room, as if she had lost touch with reality, attracted particular attention. And in the corner stood Diddy Oprah, with that same predatory smile that seemed to say, "I control all of this." This video was not just a recording of a party. It was a cry from those who are no longer with us or those who still live in constant fear and under pressure. Behind the scenes lay a terrible reality that they tried to cover up with glitz and glamour. And then Ice Cube literally screamed in the courtroom, "This is prison. They film you so they can blackmail you. So you live in fear. So you know that at any moment they can destroy you." These words cut through the silence, and no one could remain indifferent. In his opinion, it is precisely this control and intimidation that underlie the entire dark system that they have tried so hard to hide from the public. He wasn't just talking about Jamie Foxx or Cassie Ventura. He was talking about all those who had once fallen victim to this system. Ice Cube talked about young guys who thought that finally they had been given a chance to land the lead role, the dream of a lifetime. But instead, they were filmed in their most vulnerable states. For example, when they were unconscious, unable to control themselves. These videos were then used to keep them in fear and submission. He also spoke about female singers who were literally forced to attend such parties. And when the pressure became too much and their nerves couldn't take it, they were sent away to be treated for nervous breakdowns, as if it were their own fault and not the result of the atmosphere they found themselves in. These stories, as Cube said, are not isolated. They happen all the time, everywhere, but rarely reach the eyes and ears of the public. His words conveyed the weight of the suffering he had seen or heard about. He wanted people to understand that behind the beautiful magazine covers and bright stage lights, there were lives broken by pressure and blackmail. And until that system is destroyed, many will continue to suffer in the shadows. Then one night, around 2 o'clock in the morning, Ice Cube received an unexpected letter. It was a few short lines from Cassie Ventura, a woman who had already risked stepping out of the shadows but was still trapped. Her message was simple but incredibly important. "Help me. You know the truth. I can't do this alone." These words conveyed both fear and hope. Fear that the truth could destroy her, and hope that someone would finally support her and get her out of this nightmare. For Cube, this letter was like an alarm bell that could not be ignored. It was the last straw, after which it was impossible to remain silent. He realized that if he turned away again, if he decided to hide and not speak up, someone who had fallen into this system might not survive. This was more than just a case. It was a matter of life and death, of conscience and duty. From that moment on, Ice Cube decided to go all the way to show the world the truth, no matter how terrible it was. When the judge asked Ice Cube why he had remained silent all this time and had only now decided to speak out, his answer was simple and quiet, but it rang with tremendous power. Cube admitted that he had been at those parties himself, that he had seen everything with his own eyes. He hadn't spoken out before because he was afraid. He was afraid of Diddy, afraid of this powerful and ruthless system that could crush anyone who dared to stand up to it. But now, he said, his fear of the system was nothing compared to what he felt inside. The fear of being a coward, of standing by when he could have helped those who were suffering. Everything has changed. Now he speaks not only for himself, but for all those who have been broken, humiliated, and driven into a corner. For those who remain silent out of fear. For those who may never be able to speak the truth again. Ice Cube took it upon himself to become the voice of these silent ones, and it changed the entire atmosphere in the courtroom. After Ice Cube's words, an oppressive silence fell over the courtroom. Everyone felt that something really serious was about to begin. The jurors, who had previously viewed the trial as a mere spectacle, now looked at each witness with new attention and understanding. The judge was silent for several minutes, as if trying to comprehend what he had heard. Meanwhile, the prosecution lawyers energetically began to build their case. Now they had not just an accusation, but real hard evidence. The video from the party, the documents, the eyewitness testimony, all of it suddenly took on a terrifying power. It seemed as if the wall of silence was beginning to crack. The defense attorneys, on the other hand, seemed to have lost their footing. They tried to refute Cube's words, calling them fabrications, insinuations, and an attempt to gain fame. But in the eyes of many of those present, there was doubt. How much could you trust someone who had been silent for so long? And why had he decided to speak up now? All of this hung over the Diddy case, turning the trial from a routine court proceeding into a battle for truth and justice. And although there was still a lot of evidence and witnesses to come, it was Ice Cube's appearance and words that set a new disturbing tone for the entire trial. Now, no one could ignore the dark side that had previously been hidden behind the glitz and glamour. The tension in the courtroom grew with every passing minute, and everyone knew that this was the moment when the case could take a 180-degree turn. Ice Cube gathered all his strength and prepared to reveal what was to be the culmination of this high-profile trial. He asked to show another video, this time longer and more frightening. The screen showed footage taken by a hidden camera at one of Diddy's mansion parties. The camera captured several celebrities being trapped. They tried to resist, but there were people watching them, whispering threats, changing the rules of the game on the fly. The cameras didn't give them a moment's peace, and their every move could be used against them. At that moment, Ice Cube, his voice trembling with emotion, told the story of a young singer who was lured there with promises of a career, only to have her will and confidence destroyed. The video showed how she was gradually broken, not physically but mentally, pushed to the limit. He spoke not only with words but with feelings, and many in the audience could barely hold back their tears. When the video ended, Ice Cube looked straight at Diddy and said, "This isn't just a party, it's a trap. It's a prison without walls. And if we don't stop this now, tomorrow the cycle will repeat itself with someone else, with those who still believe in justice." At that moment, the entire courtroom seemed to sigh in unison. The atmosphere became almost palpable. It was not just a trial, but a struggle for human lives, for the opportunity to change a system that had been destroying lives for too long. And just when it seemed that justice was about to prevail, the most important part began. The defense lawyers went on the offensive, trying to destroy trust in Ice Cube and his evidence. But it was too late. Their words sounded hollow against the backdrop of the truth that everyone had seen with their own eyes. The defense attorneys went on the attack, trying to portray Ice Cube as a person with selfish motives, that he just wanted fame and money, and that it was all a calculated ploy. They tried to dig up dirt from his past, accusing him of lying and betrayal. But the more they tried to refute his testimony, the heavier the burden of truth he had brought to court seemed to become. The jury, watching this storm unfold, gradually began to realize that this was not just another court case, but a real split in the world of show business where power and fear were intertwined in the most dangerous way. At that moment, an unexpected witness appeared in court. One of those young artists who had lived in fear and silence for a long time, McKenna Grace. She stepped forward and told how she herself had been a victim of this system, how the videos from those parties threatened to destroy her career and her life. Her voice trembled, but her words were firm. She wanted the truth to come out so that no one else would become a hostage to this dark game. This sincere gratitude shook everyone in the courtroom. The judge looked at her with respect, the jury listened attentively, and the defense attorneys could no longer simply ignore the eyewitness testimony. The battle for the truth continued, but at that moment it became clear that the system that had been hidden for so long was beginning to crack. The outcome of this case could change everything, not only Diddy's fate, but the entire industry, where power was no longer unpunished. Her voice trembled at first, as if each word came with great effort, but with each sentence she sounded more confident and firm. "I was one of those," she began, "who thought this was the chance of a lifetime. I believed that with this name and with these people, my career would take off. But instead I found myself trapped, unable to escape. I was forced to attend parties where I was filmed with hidden cameras, where I felt like a prisoner, not an artist. When I tried to say no, I was blackmailed with these recordings, forced to obey, to be afraid and to keep quiet." She paused for a moment, swallowing hard, but didn't back down. "These videos aren't just footage from parties. They're tools of control and intimidation. They break you from the inside, turn you into a puppet in someone else's hands. And you're afraid to even think about telling anyone because you're afraid of losing everything, your reputation, your job, your life." She looked straight into the eyes of the jury, and her voice sounded like a plea. "I'm here to say that this has to end, so that no one else ends up in this situation, so that the truth comes out, so that we can finally breathe freely. Because if we remain silent, we are helping them to continue breaking us." Her words echoed through the courtroom, leaving a deep impression on everyone present. When she finished her speech, a tense silence hung in the air, as if everyone was aware of the magnitude of what was happening. The judge paused, as if giving everyone time to digest what they had heard. Then, he calmly but firmly stated that the testimony of Ice Cube and the witness would be thoroughly examined, and that the investigation into the case would be expanded, now targeting not only Diddy, but the entire system he seemed to control. The defense attorneys tried to maintain some semblance of confidence, offering alternative versions of events and accusing the witness of bias and fear, but their words no longer carried the same weight as before. They were up against the truth, backed up by footage, documents, and people who had decided to speak out. Meanwhile, the media exploded with reports. It all spread instantly across the headlines. The public was stunned. For the first time at this level, people were talking about the dark side of the industry, about the fear and manipulation that had long remained out of sight. And although the trial is not over yet, one thing is clear. Change is inevitable. The court case became more than just one person's fight. It became a symbol of the struggle against impunity and fear. Ice Cube, Cassie Ventura, the young witness, and others who dared to speak out started something bigger than just a trial. They gave hope to those who are still silent. And in this case, where the stakes were not just high but vital, the truth finally began to emerge from the darkness.